welcome to our final public talk of 2021. We made it to the end of the year. So our next sort of public talks will begin in February 2022, so you keep an eye out for what those topics will be. But this evening, I'll just start off briefly by going over some health and safety, and an event of an earthquake, drop, cover, hold, and follow our instructions. Exits are out through the back here, and we'll meet over near the squash court or out through the entrance that you came in and over by the squash courts to my right here. Toilets, we've got women toilets at the back on my right and men's back on my left over through here. So, this evening we are delighted to have Amber, a senior mining geologist with us from Macraes, to come and talk to us. Her topic is a history from the start of time. So we are planning on finishing at 7. Hopefully we'll just you can speed it up.
So we might start the watch.
Yeah. So we're really excited to have this engagement with Macraes. They are one of our founding partner and do sponsor the Geopark. So we're thrilled to have this ongoing relationship with Macraes and for them to be able to come and give this talk this evening. So a big thank you to Amber, who I know has been up since well before dawn this morning. We also have Ainsley with us, who's going to be filming part of the talk. And we're also filming this, and it'll be up on our YouTube channel as well. So there will be a time for questions and answers at the end. So we just ask that you hold those questions to the end so we can just keep going with the flow of the talk. And we aim to finish up around 7 o'clock this evening. So I'm super excited to learn more about the geology up around Macraes and gold. We talk a lot about the schist and the basement rock in a lot of our educational talks that I do in schools or outreach programs. So to learn about a particular area, like schist forms the basement of Zealandia, the story that we tell through the Geopark. So super excited, I know we're all in for a treat to learn something new today. So over to you, Amber.
Well, thank you everyone for coming today. Really appreciate it. So Macraes history from the start of time. A few things to get through, so hopefully I don't run over time and come some questions. But I'm going to start off with just a bit of an introduction about Macraes itself. I'll give you a bit of a geological history of the area, and then I'm going to talk a wee bit about the gold rush because I'm quite interested in that myself. And then I'll talk a bit about mining at Macraes today and how we extract the gold out of the ground. So just a bit of an overview. So for some of you who don't know, Macraes is about 20 minutes inland from Palmerston. We've been operating up there since 1990. The pit itself is relatively deep. It's got gold history starting since 1861, and Macraes has been, the modern mining techniques have been happening for about the last 30 years, and there's been exploration since 1984, so about the last 40 years has been exploration happening up here for the more modern styles of techniques. So far we move about 1 billion tonnes of dirt a year, which is made up of about 140 million tonnes of ore. So that's the gold bearing portion of it. And so far we've extracted 5 million ounces over 5 million ounces of gold. But the high Macraes shear zone, I'm thinking, is over 10 million ounces of gold within it. So we're about halfway there at the moment. So hopefully we've got a few more years up there to go. So on the screen there, I've just got a couple of diagrams to show you just how deep the underground and open pit portions of the mine actually are, and the scale of the sky tower. So Macraes surface at Macraes town itself is about 550 metres above sea level, and at the bottom of the pit I think it got down to about 230 metres above sea level, and underground is currently about 300 metres below sea level. So just that pile of dirt there with 1 billion tonnes of rock, again, for the sky tower for reference, makes about 600 metre high pile of dirt, so quite a bit of movement in a year. So, the Otago schist, obviously New Zealand basement terrains. It's formed hundreds of millions of years ago as part of Gondwana land. I'm sure a few of you might have heard of that before, maybe? Yep. So it was deposited as a series of sediments, and they were bound by faults to form accretionary complexes. And during the Cretaceous period, so about 80 to 100 million years ago, New Zealand broke away from Gondwana land and started moving northwards towards its current position. We've got pretty complex tectonic history in New Zealand. Just going to read off my notes, sorry. So pretty complex tectonic history of both subsidence and deposition. You guys all would have seen the Waitaki limestone out there, so that's obviously been deposited when New Zealand was underwater. And then we've had a bit of an Aegean tectonic reconfiguration around 20 million years ago, which occurred with a bit of uplift development, and that is when the Alpine fault formed. So we're mining the Macraes shear zone. So it runs about 30 k's long strike, and it can get to about Cretaceous in age. So, and it's hosted in a Jurassic green species schist. So this formed under intense heat and pressure, and it was this intense heat and pressure which mobilised the fluids within the rock, which made the gold be extracted out into deposits along this Macraes shear zone. So up at Macraes we've got about a series of pits that run about 16 k's in length, and they go about 2.5 k's down dip of the Macraes shear zone itself. So pretty extensive mining going on here. You've also got a series of sedimentary and volcanic sequences as well. So you've got the Swinburne Formation, which is deposited about 34 million years ago. And it ranges from mudstones to sandstone. It's also got volcanitic sandstone in it, which indicates that it was deposited in a shallow marine environment. Within the sequence, which is the top one, you get a plesiosaur and mosasaur that was skeletons that were found up in East Otago there, which is pretty cool. And then you've also got a few whale and turtle bones that were also found up in there. Then you've got the Bannockburn Formation, or the Dunstan Formation, and that's a quartz conglomerate sandstone with minor mudstone in it as well. This was formed in a really interesting environment actually. It was lacustrine environment, which they believe ran sort of from northern Southland right through to the Lindis Pass. So it's quite a big lake formation that they think it's deposited in, which is really cool. You've also got a series of macrofossils present, which include leaves and fish bones and things like that. And then the last one is the Dunedin volcanics. You guys will be pretty familiar with volcanic rocks around Oamaru. So typically basalts, massive conglomerate containing mantle-derived nodules, and also a type of phonolite as well. And most of these beds were relatively small and short-lived. Largest flow is about 130 square metres up in near Waitaki, which is quite interesting. So moving on to the gold rush. I'm quite interested in the gold rush, so I thought I'd better throw a wee bit in there. So the gold rush started in 1861, and this is when Gabriel Reid first found gold in Gabriel's Gully, basically. It actually kicked off back in 1952. Thomas Archibald and a party of 5 men headed up to Clutha on a whale boat after some Māori had reported actually seeing some gold up the Clutha River. And it's also said that one of the Māori picked up a potato-sized piece of gold, didn't have any use for it, so it's thrown it back in the river. And it's never seen again. So, bad day for that guy. So, in 1861, Gabriel started finding gold in Gabriel's Gully, and sorry, just read it. So basically, within the year of finding that gold, there was 11,500 people have moved up to Gabriel's Gully to start prospecting up there. And in 1965, you've basically got 24,000 people up there. So within 4 years, it's been a massive influx of people get up there and have a look for some gold. Most of them were pretty successful, which is pretty cool. Between 1862 and 1875, there was a bit of gold mining actually up at Macraes itself, so I'll start talking about that next. This next slide just shows you some of the historic Macraes goldfield deposits. Thank you, Heather, for providing that one for me. And as you can see, it's quite a vast area in which there was some mining happening throughout the area. Macraes itself is just down here, near Innes Mills. So that's where the modern Macraes town is at the moment. So we've got a stamping battery up in Deepdale, and it was operating commercially from 1889 to 1953. So there's actually 4 stamping batteries in this site. The first battery was built by the Moran brothers on the east side of Deepdale Creek, and then that was sold to the Donaldson brothers the following year. The Donaldson brothers operated it in that current location until 1953, and that's when it was dismantled for scrap metal. But for some years they were actually the only exporters of scheelite to, exported out of New Zealand. And they exported to both World Wars, which is quite good to know. 1989, the Maritime Company built a battery on the West Bank. Unfortunately, this suffered poor water supply, so it didn't last that long before that went bust. In 1902, Charles McGill transferred that Maritana battery to the site, which is now known as the Calorie Battery, which is still in its current location today. So that went broke in 1933. It was pretty dog-eat-dog world out there. If you weren't making any money, you just basically shut the doors and walked away. So the Calorie brothers began mining in Macraes district itself in 1912, and they took over the battery in the 1920s when it formed the Round Hill Mining Company. And again, this operated through the late 1950s, so it's quite an extensive history here of operating. So scheelite itself is a source of tungsten, and it's used by steel manufacturers as a hardening agent. So they used it a lot in the armoury side of things. So this is what the actual stamping battery configuration looks like itself. Has anyone been up there and had a look at it? Yeah? I think they crank it up every 6 months to a year, just making sure it still goes. Pretty noisy, but it's pretty cool. So one of those, that stamping battery that's up there at the moment can process about half a tonne an hour. And they're powered by either a water wheel or a kerosene engine. So in the 1930s, the Calorie Battery had a big overhaul, and they installed one of these kerosene engines into it. And they also installed a Whiffley table and a heavier stamping unit as well. So, just give you a rundown as to how this wee puppy works. As I said, it's pretty noisy when it does operate, but they're pretty cool to see. So, the rock is basically, the rock comes through down into the stampers where it's ground into a bit of a fine sand. And then it's squeezed through onto a mesh. And then that gold from that mesh bonds onto a mercury coated Muntz table, and then that amalgam is scraped off in that mercury, and it's boiled down, and the gold actually separates off the mercury from there, and that's how they separate it out. So mercury poisoning was quite a significant illness back in the day. A few more health and safety rules implemented now, so it's not an issue. And then you've got the shear-like process. So similar process in the sense that you do crush the rock in the same way, it's ground into that wet sand. But it then goes over a shaken Whiffley table, and your heavies from that tungsten actually separate out, and they're collected, and then that's melted down. So now we'll talk about mining at Macraes today. I'm absolutely working through this, aren't I? It's alright. Right, so I'm going to talk a wee bit about both open pit and underground mining techniques, because I've worked in both areas and sort of know a wee bit about them. So on the right hand side you've got some grade control samples. So once the exploration team have come through and they've done all the exploration drilling, and the mine site itself has actually been deemed as economic for operational purposes, the grade control samples will come along, and that's the start of the mining cycle. You've got a grade control rig there in the middle, and we catch those samples on the right hand, your right hand side. They get sent to the lab and they'll get assayed, so they'll give us the gold grades back. That picture on the left hand side is of kind of a similar technique, that's underground grade control processes. So that's drilled with a diamond drill, and we collect the core from that, we log it, and then we sample that and we get the assays back from that one. Due to spatial constraints in the underground, we don't quite have the density of sampling in the underground as we do in the open pit. So there's a wee bit more creative license there, and a wee bit more interpretation goes on, determining as to what that gold's doing and where it's going to be. So from there we get the assays back, and we do a bit of mapping. So in the open pit, on the left hand, your right hand side again, it's what we call trench mapping. So we're 20 tonne digger to dig us a trench, and we go in there and we identify all the geological features that are containing all the gold at the time. You've got a picture of a bit of wall mapping there, so that's the one at the bottom. And then the one on your left is a bit of underground mapping. So you can see can't see it very well, but it's actually an underground drive, so it's the face. And then you've got one of the maps that they've done, and that's how we determine where that gold is. So you can see all the nice quartz veining in there, and that's where all the gold's contained. So once we've done all the mapping, we've got all our assays back, in the open pit we create these really nice pretty pictures, and the hotter the colours, the more gold that are in them. So you can see that the orange and the reds are really nice high grade gold, and then you've got the yellows and blues, which are just a wee bit less gold, but still economical enough for us to send it through to the mill. So once we've defined those boundaries between the ore and the waste, we get to dig it out. So we've got a 360 tonne digger, that's one of our biggest diggers on site. They'll load 170 tonnes into the back of one of those trucks. They'll cart it down to the mill. And then down at the mill, now it's quite a process to get the gold out of the rock. So starts on the bottom, gets crushed, very similar to the stamping battery technique. And from there it goes through a series of processes and slurries to try and get that gold out of the rock. Yeah, I don't know much about that side of it. But it is a very interesting process and it is quite complex. And then we get the gold out. Just like that. So that bar here, I was holding that in 2015. And at the time it was $1,560 an ounce, so it was worth about $750,000. And in today's value, it's worth $1.25 million. So we purchased the gold. And that's actually the end of the talk. I ripped through it really quickly. Any questions?
Thank you. Yeah, are there any questions for Emma this evening? So
the battery is the key, isn't it? To try and break the rock down into smaller pieces, but there still must be bits that don't get released.
Correct. Yeah. So you do have a wee bit in the tails, but it's pretty low. Obviously, we can extract enough of that gold to make it economical to still produce those gold bars, cover all the diesel and all the operational costs. But no, you're right. There is a wee bit of material that goes out. Yes.
You did that one day, was that heavy as well?
Sorry.
Was that one day as well?
We usually pour those every 2 or 3 days. And they'll pour a few at a time, depending on how high grade material we're putting through the plant at the time. Yeah.
And you're also processing stuff on the west coast, is it?
We actually have been processing that for a few years now. So they ceased operation. I can't remember what year that was. But we'll finish all the concentrate from there now. Yeah.
Is that the biggest piece of gold you've found yet?
That's not. So we don't actually have any visible gold in the rock. It's all caught up in the sulfides within the matrix of the rock itself. So the process in putting it through the plant extracts that gold and concentrates it, and then we get to melt it all down and pour it into one of those gold bars.
What's security like?
Pretty good.
There's no back door?
No.
So, in your original map of from one of the land,
Yep.
you showed that the area that was possibly gold in the great deal of that was under the ocean.
Yeah.
And seabed there. So does that still, that trail still exist between the different countries, going all the way up to New Zealand?
I'm not sure. There will be. So with Gondwana land, I know that you're finding fossils on different continents that are the same. So I guess that's how they sort of define that pathway. Yeah, and how they can trace that train that you're talking about. Yeah.
So what do you do with tailings from the ocean?
So they're contained in a tailings dam, and then eventually the environmental team up there will cap it, and then we rehabilitate it and provide it back to the farmers for grazing.
So is it like a fine ground stone? Is it?
Yeah, so it sort of ranges from a really, really fine mud to like a coarse sand.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you find any other things in there besides gold? Do you have any other byproducts?
Yeah, so we've got byproducts, as I said, we've got tungsten, and then we've also got very small trace elements of silver and copper as well. So the gold bars go out about 98% pure. Yeah. Yep.
You know, the dip and the strike. Are you just doing the Macraes because this beam and stuff that's got the gold in it is coming to the surface there?
Correct, yeah. So we're the Macraes shear zone, sorry, I should have explained this a bit better. So it dips at about 30 degrees and it runs about 30 k's along strike. So it dips about 15 to 30 degrees. So whatever we can't access via an open pit mining situation, that's where we go underground so that we can get that deeper gold. It's more economical for us to mine it that way.
So how big is this?
The thing. So
On top of it,
at Macraes itself, it's a good couple of 100 metres thick, the high Macraes shear zone, but at either end of that 30 k's, it's only a couple of metres thick, so it does get quite narrow. Yeah.
So is it a New Zealand company?
Sorry?
Is it a New Zealand company?
No, Melbourne.
Some years ago, we went on a tour on a bus
Yep.
around the gold field, around the whole operation. Do tours like that still operate?
No, they don't, unfortunately.
Really, really interesting.
Yeah, no, not at the moment.
How many of those diggers have you got there now?
We've got 3 3600s and then a 2500, which is just a wee bit smaller, so it's about 250. 250 tonne. So,
How many trucks?
15, I think, in the open pit. Yeah. Yeah.
What does that think?
Oh.
We actually visited, so we saw the notice of the growing thing. We thought, oh, that sounds interesting. So who's actually putting it on? Like you're bigger talks once a month or something?
Yeah, so we have experts such as Amber come in to give public talks for the Waitaki Whitestone Geopark. So we tell, the Geopark tells the story of the formation of Zealandia, or New Zealand, the continent that New Zealand sits on. And we do that through a variety of mediums. One of them is through the geology, but we also cover other topics such as biodiversity or ecosystems, social history, things like that as well. And so we have a different expert come in each month, and is that expert of the month to talk about the geology. So the schist, as Amber said, forms the basement, the schist and the Waitaki, which is the more of a meta-sediment, unmetamorphosed sands and muds, forms the basement of much of Zealandia, in particular this part of Zealandia, and this is what all the other rocks were deposited or formed on top of that. And of course, Macraes sits high because of the tectonic features in that part, so it's been uplifted and exposed, and it's stunning landscape down that way. And so it forms a really important story of the formation of our land, because beyond that it then moves into a different terrain in terms of the capable. So it's a really significant part of the Geopark, that particular schist, that area.
Very interesting, thank you.
No, so the open cast side of it sort of becomes economic, and still be able to carry on underground mining for gold.
Yeah, depending on the concentration of gold,
That was kind of be my question, is what's the shelf life, if you like, of a mine? Have you got an end date in mind today, or does it just depend on?
2027 at the moment.
Right.
Yeah, so look, when Macraes started, we were given, back in 1990, I'm talking, I think we were given 5 years then,
Right.
and we haven't shut down yet, so it's got a wee, they just keep finding more and more gold.
And how does what you're producing here compare with the mine up in the North Island at Waitaki?
It's totally different type of geology. So they are more of a, it's not volcanic, but it's totally different. We're basement terrains, whereas they're an intrusive deposit. Sorry.
Is there harmful gases?
No. No, we're pretty safe down there. Yeah, the health and safety is pretty top notch. Sorry, yes.
So when you leave, is there a plan to environmentally restart the local native plants and leave it in a healthy condition?
Yeah, so there's always usually an exit strategy in there, and it'll be all part. The environmental team look after all that side of things. I don't know too much about it, but yeah, there is a rehabilitation process that they will have to meet in regards to council consents and things.
Is there a review at every year too?
Yeah.
To share current what mines and how we can change since the last year?
When we went on our little bus tour, they took us around and showed the areas where they were working, but also areas that had been made good, so to speak. And it was quite impressive actually.
When you done the map, what sort of resolution is that? Because you've got big machines, like 10 metres or?
So that's on that here, or
What do you use?
so it's usually about a 1 in 500 scale. So it's usually pretty small. So yeah, each one of those two is about 50 by 50 metres.
Well, Amber, I'd just like to say thank you so much for coming and sharing all of your knowledge and expertise with us. Because I think quite often it's a bit of a mystery to lots of us what goes up on, what goes on up at that mine. And a lot of us will be familiar with gold panning.
Yep.
But then extracting gold from hard rock, completely different story, and a big unknown for a lot of people. So thank you very much. And we have a wee bag of local goodies to give you. So this is just, full of wee local goodies just to express gratitude for you coming and sharing your talk with us. So everyone would just like to give a round of applause. So just to wrap things up, I just encourage people to sign up for our newsletter. We hold lots of various events during the year. So you can sign up for our newsletter down on the table back there, and it's a way just to keep up to date with what we're about. You can follow us on Facebook as well, which we often will put little bits of information on there. We recently did one on schist, you'll be pleased to know. So little bits of geology, history, or interesting bits of information, including whether or not we're running beach cleanups or plantings or other event days. So I encourage you to do that as well. And really look forward to seeing everyone back here in February for our next public talk. So the public talks are the third Thursday of every month. And they are, for people from out of the area, they are available also on YouTube. So you can access them through our YouTube channel, which is Waitaki Whitestone Geopark. So thank you all for coming, and we look forward to seeing you again in 2022. Thank you.